Hey there, it's Olivia-Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and welcome to the ultimate catastrophe that we all know very well as readers, and that is TBR Catastrophe. So for the past 2 years running, every year in June I count all of my books and disclose how many books I own in total, how many unread and how many read books. And today I'm here to do exactly the same. I decided to call these videos TBR Catastrophe because that's the catastrophe behind Olivia's Catastrophe. In 2020, we're going to look at the numbers for 2020 and then compare to today. In 2020, I had 590 books in total. I had 365 read books and I had 225 unread books. And now, this year, as of June 1st, 2021, I have 702 books. I have 456 read books and 246 unread books. So those are my numbers, and I have to admit, I'm quite proud of these numbers. So first of all, yes, my book collection has grown. I feel like that's just something that happens every year. It grows. I am a reader. I like to collect books. It happens. But what I have to say is that my read books have increased monumentally, and I know that you could only see that it's increased by 90 books. However, if you've been on this channel for the past year, you'll see that my unhauls have increased, and I have unhauled a lot of books from my read shelf. I've unhauled more books from my read shelf than from my unread shelf, and because of that, it means that my bookshelf having increased by 90 books read, plus I've gotten rid of some along the way, that's a big shift. My TBR shelf has grown by 21 books, but I don't feel too guilty about it. I know that I've read a lot of books that were on my TBR as of last year by now. I've also been unhauling from my TBR shelves too. I think I'm done with unhauling from my TBR shelves. There's one more unhaul that you'll see next month with a few more books from my TBR shelf, but now I'm done. Everything on my TBR shelf are books that I want to read, so now my goal is to just keep on reading from my TBR and get that number down, and hopefully by this time next year it will not have grown, but it will actually have decreased. I think that's the only goal that I'm going to set myself for next year. Have my TBR shelf decrease in numbers. My read shelf can grow or shrink depending on whether I feel like unhauling more read books or just, moving along more books to read. But I do take more care in which books I add to my read shelves, as in every wrap up I see which books I don't want to hold on to and I just unhaul them in my next unhaul. So I think unhauling is a more regular and more staple thing that I do, so my read shelves will grow slower, but I also want my TBR shelves to decrease faster. Am I ashamed of having 702 books? Not particularly. I do want to grow my own personal library, or whatever you want to call it, and I do get rid of books fairly regularly. If I don't enjoy it, it's gone. So I feel like my book collection growth is healthy, if that makes sense. As for my TBR and thinking about approaching this catastrophe, there are a lot of good things that I'm doing at the moment that I just want to keep on doing. At the moment I'm reading exclusively from my physical shelf, so that is definitely helping. The fact that I don't have a very good English selection library around definitely helps. I don't get distracted by my library, but also because of the pandemic and using screens a lot more than usual, I haven't been reading any of my ebooks, so it's been exclusively from my shelves, which helps me get that number down. Doesn't help my Kindle TBR, but that's a whole nother story we're going to get to later in the video. I've also started to read my big books again. I think the year before I was a bit intimidated by big books and I didn't read them as much, which is why one of my goals for 2021 was to read more of my big books, and I've successfully been reading over 500 plus or 400 plus pages books regularly, so I think I'm acing that goal, and that does mean my bigger books are not lingering on my TBR. Even if it slows down the speed at which I get through my TBR, the big books need to be read as well, so I think that's a good thing. Another positive is that I've been getting to the oldest books on my TBR and the newest books on my TBR equally well. I think what I mostly do is read somewhere in the middle. I read books that have been on my TBR, not the longest but also not the shortest period of time, but there are a few books that I get in and I read fairly quickly, especially review copies, because they are review copies. But I've also been steadily getting to some of the oldest books on my TBR. For example, I read One Day by David Nichols so far this year, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. These are books that have been on my TBR for years and now I'm finally kicking them off. I'm also currently reading War and Peace, which is one of my oldest owned books. The only thing is I still haul quite a few books, but I don't feel bad about that because I have to be honest, I don't buy that many books at the moment. My buying has increased quite a bit, but it's still not on the level of pre-2019, because pre-2019 I used to buy a lot of books willy-nilly all over the place. Then I went on a buying ban for a year, and since then I would say that my buying has been okay. It's not been the most, but it's not been the least either. I do have the intention of buying an unread book and a read book every month, but I'm going to let go of that intention because I kind of play around with it. Sometimes I buy more secondhand books and I don't count those towards that intention. They're kind of my exception. And also I tend to be buying quite a few books lately that are read books because I'm trying to get some books from my childhood that I would like to have on my shelves, and I also have been buying books that I read as audiobooks or ebooks in physical form to add to my shelves because I really enjoyed them. So I don't think I need to keep that buying intention. I'm going to have it vaguely there in the back of my mind so I don't overspend on books, but I think actually my book buying is okay. You might not think so from how often you see me post a haul, which is like every 2 months, but I don't feel too bad about that at all. The next thing I'm going to do is talk about my Kindle and what's happening with my Kindle. So as you know, for the past year that we've been in this COVID situation, I haven't really been reading on my Kindle. It's not been my favorite mode of reading. I still love my Kindle. Okay, my Kindle's beautiful. Where is it? It's not here right now. It's beautiful and I love it. And it's got a lot of books on there that I do want to read. But when I last checked my Kindle and my content, it said I had 650 ebooks. And I've never ever bought an ebook. So all of those ebooks are free Kindle books or review copies that were sent my way, and sometimes still to this day, even though I haven't been on L-Device in a long time, I get approved for books, like the publisher just sends them. So I don't want to delete L-Device because I like having it as an option for if I really want to ask for a review copy. For example, I asked for Felix Ever After and I read that through my Kindle, so sometimes I want to have that option. But it does mean that I needed to do a big clean out because most of the ebooks that I got around 2015, 2016 and 2017, and I think those years I was not very careful with my Kindle just because it can hold so much content that I was downloading loads and loads of free books. And I also followed a lot of newsletters at the time where it just told you when bestsellers were free for a day or whatever, and then I would just download it. I now am not subscribed to any book buying newsletters. If you're a bookshop website, don't subscribe to your newsletter. If you are books are on deals today, I don't subscribe because that helps me to not gain a lot of books and to really be selective with what I'm getting. But yes, it does mean that I had 650 Kindle books. But as of today, I only have 350. I say only, but I only have 350 because I'm currently in the process of going through every single book on my Kindle and seeing if I want to read it or not, and if I don't, I'm getting rid of it. The next letter I need to do is M. I'm going in alphabetical order, so I've cleared out A to whichever letter comes before M, and now I'm cleaning up M to Z, but of course I've got more books in the M to Z section than the previous one because all the books that start with the is in T, and there's lots of books that start with the consonants that are in the second half of the alphabet. So I've got a lot of work to do, but I did want to just document it here so that in future TBR Catastrophe videos I can talk about my Kindle TBR as well. Last but not least, I had somebody ask me on Instagram to talk about how I use my spreadsheet, because I mentioned that I have a spreadsheet to keep organized how many books I have, what books I intend to get, and this spreadsheet is called Olivia-Savannah's Personal Library on my computer. And I started it because I was living in the UK for university and I had most of my books here at my parents' house in the Netherlands, and I didn't want to double buy books, which did happen. For example, I bought 2 copies of The Girl on the Train and I didn't like the book, so I had to get rid of 2 copies, and I just didn't want to double buy things by accident. So I decided to document all the books that I owned, and then I created a few more tabs. And yes, so I'm going to talk about it. The first tab that I have is owned books read, where I've listed every single book that I've owned and read, and the second tab is owned books unread, where I list all of my unread books. This means that when I make my TBR Catastrophe video, I don't have to physically go and count every single book because I already know how many books I have. And also at the end of the month, I just take the books that I've read for that month, delete them from my unread, and copy paste them into my Read, and it's that easy of keeping track of my physical collection. My next tab in my spreadsheet is where we go into other TBR sections. So I've got one for sequels, and these are series that I've started and series that I'm interested in continuing, so I say which sequel I need next. And sometimes I start a series and I'm not interested in continuing, so it doesn't go in that page, but I will put the second book or the third book or whichever book comes next into that spreadsheet, so I know at some point I need to pick that one up, buy it, get it from a library, whatever, what have you. The one after that is books to get by authors I liked. So one thing that I wanted to start doing as of last year is reading more books by authors whose works I've previously enjoyed. I'm not someone who has a favourite author. I don't do favourite authors typically. There's some exceptions such as the romance genre, but I typically don't have this is my favourite author in these genres. I just like a certain series from a book, and after I finish that series or after I finish that book, I don't usually look into the rest of their works. I just move on and read whatever I want to read next. But I want to change that. I want to read more books by authors whose works I've previously enjoyed. So if I enjoyed a book, I will go and see what else they have and see what looks best for me to read next, and then put that book in that spreadsheet so that if I go book shopping, I know that I should prioritize getting some of those books if I'm not prioritizing sequels. And then after that, I've got one more tab which is called wish list. And on my wish list, I have books that I've just heard about on booktube that I'm very interested in reading, books that I've heard about from wherever that I want to read someday. This is the equivalent to what people call their Goodreads TBR, where it's books you don't own and you don't have physically, but one day you want to read. And that list is so long. There's like 400 books on there. Will I ever get to all 400 books when I've got my physical TBR? Probably not, but it calms my soul to know that I've written down every book that I'm interested in reading, and if I ever go book shopping, I can look at that tab or the sequels tab or the books by authors I like tab and know that I'm going to probably find one of those books in a bookshop. I don't usually whip out my phone while I'm book shopping and browse it. I kind of just know, generally speaking, what's on there. But what I do like about it is that it keeps track of underrated books, because then it means I can order those online or like seek them out specifically sometimes, whereas I'll probably be able to find the bestsellers in a bookshop and just get them gradually over time. And yeah, that's how I track that. I do have a Goodreads. It does have a Goodreads TBR on it, but it's actually fake. Like, none of those books are, they're all outdated. I just don't know how to delete an entire Goodreads TBR. I don't think there's a button for that, so everybody's like, oh, your TBR, these are the books I also have on my TBR. I'm like, actually, that's not on my TBR, it's just on the Goodreads page. So there you have it. That's it for this episode of TBR Catastrophe. Now you know a bit more about how I track my counting of books and my TBR, how I'm doing and progressing, how many books I have, so I can feel ashamed at the fact that everybody now knows this number. Please let me know in the comment section down below, do you know how many books you own, or is that something that scares you too much to count? Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!